Sabi girl no dey too like talk. Animals dey in human form. Body man nobody like work, but you must hustle if you want job. You no finish they won't fight us. If them they run them no fit catch up. I know they form say I too righteous. No con they form say you too like us. You no get the time for the hate and the bad energy. Got my mind on my money. Make you dance like broccoli. Steady green like broccoli. Steady on my grind, oh yeah, what they want telling me. Could deny my fantasy. They want to check if my tap ain't no wrong. But it ain't wrong.
Out on helicopter. So within 1 minute after the call, they have to dispatch someone, and the helicopter has to take off within 2 minutes after his alarm. So 2 minutes after the dispatch center. Yeah, usually they can go out if the helicopter is the fastest emergency doctor who will arrive on scene. But the dispatcher can also send them additionally if it's some kind of special mission, maybe a child or person or something, so they can send out a normal ground-based emergency doctor and ambulance, and in addition the helicopter. So now a little bit about the ADAC Air Rescue. It's the biggest HEMS operator in Germany, with more than 50 years of experience in HEMS. We have actual 38 bases. We do about 55,000 missions per year, so a little bit more than the half of whole Germany. 6 of our bases are operating the first, and they are doing so about 500 hoist missions per year. Which is a little bit special in Germany, is that we have the overall responsibility for the service. So we are responsible for the flight, the medical, and the ground operations. We are the aircraft owner by ourselves, and we do the maintenance and every modifications we have to do. And of course, we are responsible for the crew selection and the training of all the crew members. Yeah. Actually, we have about 1,200 pilots, paramedics, physicians, and techniques in our crew. Okay. Next, one click. Here. The headquarters of the ADAC Air Rescue is located in Munich. Next one. And the ADAC HEMS Academy is the training center from the ADAC Air Rescue is located in St. Augustine. It's in Cologne. In Germany, we have the flight training center and also a medical training center. Next year, we will put everything together in the Air Rescue campus. It's on the airport EDMO next to Munich, and there will be the headquarters of the ADAC Air Rescue as of the headquarters of the ADAC HEMS Academy, also with the flight training, the medical training, and the operational training, all in one building. On the left side, you can see how it should look next year in April. And on the right side, it's an actual photo taken from one of our emergency doctors from an HEMS helicopter. So what are we doing for training? On one side, we are doing flight training. Actually, we have 4 full flight simulators in a joint venture together with Airbus. Next year in our new campus, we will have a total of 4 full flight simulators with about 5 changeable cockpits and additional virtual reality simulators. So it should be the biggest helicopter simulation center in Europe. Also, we're doing a lot of medical training in our training facility, as like another way like this week here in Lagos in Nigeria. So that's a little bit more about our medical training. We are an international training center from the American Heart Association. In this way, we set up training sites worldwide. Like CASI is our newest training site here in Lagos. And a training site can do independently courses from the American Heart Association, and we are the supporter. Also, we are members and certified to different other national and international associations for certificate courses. A big part we do beside of the training is consulting. we help building up HEMS systems, improvement of HEMS, EMS, and offshore systems. So next slide, please. So it's a really complicated field because setting up a HEMS system is not only to buy a helicopter. It's one big and one important questions, but there are really many parts you have to look at. And even these parts here on this slide is only an example and maybe a small part of what you have to look at. Because the philosophy behind this, next page, please. Next slide, yeah, is that there is no best practice and there is no possibility to copy and paste the HEMS system to another country. You always have to have a really close look at the regional specifications about the healthcare system in the region, and every HEMS system has to be really special. Okay, next slide. So we have three philosophies we are doing in our consulting and in our training projects. Just the last one. First is always patient and flight safety. That's the most important thing you have to do in aviation and in medical aviation. Next one is building up reliable systems. Nobody is happy if you help them build up a system and maybe 2 years later it's not working. And the third thing we are we say every time is providing independence and autonomy to our partners, because we think a reliable and a really good and safe system should be always done by the people in that region and not from a company coming from the other side of the world. There is a congress about HEMS offshore and medical aviation with ambulance wings. It is every 4 to 5 years. And the next time it will be held by the ADAC Air Rescue in Munich. It's in 2026. I hope we will see you all there. Yeah, it's a really great congress. So if you have any questions, here are my contact dates, and thank you for your time.
I think I will take 2 questions before we go into the next presentation, which is in 5 minutes. So if we can cue the next presentation, Mr. Ralph Setz, he's on the Zoom from Buha, Switzerland.
I was wondering, because I see that you have about 5 callouts per piece for some of your centers. And I was wondering, what are the protocols that decides whether you will dispatch an helicopter to an incident?
So there are some criteria for the dispatch center. Should they go out only in ambulance with paramedics, or an ambulance in addition an emergency doctor? And then the computer system in the dispatch center calculates how long will the ground-based emergency doctor need time to be on scene. And if the helicopter is faster, then they will send out a helicopter because it's faster. And the second thing it could be is that there is a case which sounds complicated, like a drowning child or a burnt person. And then the person in the dispatch center knows, okay, that's a really special case. And in HEMS, you have a really high caseload on complicated missions. The medical crew on a HEMS helicopter is much more routine in this. And then they will send out a helicopter additional to the ground-based doctor by themselves. And they don't have to ask someone. If they say, okay, that sounds crazy and very special, they send out a helicopter in addition.
And we'll go into the next presentation on the Zoom. We have Mr. Ralph Setz from Buha.
The main business you see here, so we do galleys and carts for Boeing and Airbus products. But here today we talk about the medical aspect, this business unit here on the right. Of course, we have some vision philosophy. Heinrich Bucher always wanted to do superior workmanship, very reliable product, and lightweight. Of course, lightweight is key in aviation and of course also for the HEMS mission. We see here on the fixed wing side, we provide stretcher system. You see a stretcher system on the left for Emperor and ATR. On the right, you see Boeing and Airbus planes. Nearly for all these planes we can offer. And what is unique that you can install those kind of stretcher in minutes without any tooling. So we have a unique flip-in system that allows the technician quickly to install it in some minutes. But today let's focus on the medical solution for the helicopters. I have here the two models for which we provide equipment. The 145 from ADAC on the left-hand side, while they celebrated 50 years some years ago. On the right-hand side, the H135 from the DRF, also a big non-profit company in Germany. So those are the two most successful helicopters in the HEMS world worldwide. Around about 50% of all the helicopters in this mission are from Airbus and these two helicopters. So we provide solutions only for these two. We see here, we call this certification AC67 Flex for the 135 and the AC70 Flex for the H145, the larger helicopters. So you see the different equipment here, the stretcher, the seats, the cabinet, the walls. Flex is something new for us, and Flex here in this aspect means that both of these solutions you can really install in any helicopter within 15-20 minutes. You need a very little service bulletin modification at the beginning, but then you can, on the left side for the 135, really in 50-20 minutes, you install everything that you see here. So this is a bit a new concept also for us, but very interesting for customers who want to change the configuration from time to time. Offshore helicopter converted into medical within half an hour, very easily, or some police or some even some hospitals to change it quickly. These are solutions we have so far. You see, we don't call them Flex because those are dedicated solutions. That means they're all the time installed. And these are configuration that the ADAC is using. And let's say some mature HEMS operators in Europe who know that the helicopter will be for the next 20 years completely in the HEMS mission. Let's focus some slides on the first two Flex solution. So this again here is the 135 helicopter cabin. And all what you see here on this picture is from Bucher and is installed again in 20 minutes. So we have a bit of highlights here. That is a certification, of course, a STC EASA certified solution here from Bucher. We have our own design, production, and support capability in the house. And you see the key components here. You can do configuration change. You start maybe with a stretcher, you add some seats later. So it's a very flexible concept to go up to a maximum capability that you see here. What you need, as I said, you need nearly nothing on the helicopter. So you can buy a new helicopter, you can buy a used helicopter, and only with two very small service bulletins that you need to prepare for some kind of power connection, some kind of grounding, bonding, you can install all this equipment. At the end, I show you a little video that you see is not really marketing speech, that it's really true. And you see on the picture here, you need only a kind of a screwdriver, a spanner, and that's it for that kind of installation of all that equipment. Here we have the key components. So very flexible, as I said. Some customers said it's like a Lego box system. You can select a different stretcher system, different cabinets, different, of course, device to use, different storage. The key elements in a HEMS helicopter, in a medical helicopter, are always, you can have a special floor, special medical seats that you can slide and turn, special stretcher loading system, medical walls with electricity, with oxygen, with lighting, and kind of storage system. So those are the key components. We see here a full kit. And as I said, you can downgrade it and you can even upgrade it later. A quick look what you can do with such kind of equipment. We see here you can go from a light EMS up to high camps on the right-hand side, means intensive care transport. So you see we have a different stretcher, a more comfortable stretcher. We may have more seat on board. On the 135, maximum 3 seats, more oxygen, more lighting. So this you can configure according to your needs. If you provide maybe only for the offshore from time to time, a light EMS is okay. But if you go to hospital transfer, maybe a high camp system can be good. As I mentioned, different stretcher system from foldable, simple stretcher to more lightweight and more comfortable one up to the so-called HEMS stretcher system here. The same is for the retainer. We have different retainer systems. Usually on the 135, the rear loading is a normal capability, but we have also some side loading capability. Again, all this, of course, certified according to the EASA requirements, where you need to prove that the stretcher with the loading system is compliant to all the stress and load requirements. Here we have the example of the medical wall. As I said, with some lighting, with some oxygen outlet, you can fix the medical devices on the wall, on the side, on the roof. So a lot of flexibility. We see here what we can consider also in our company as a unique system, standard interface and retainer. So you see here a medical device that you're all familiar, like an Oxylog system. We built a retainer and we built standard interface. So you have the possibility to just take the device and click it into a position on the wall, on the roof, on the floor. You see always the red lever, you push it and you can remove the device and you can put it in a different position. So this is really very unique and we are proud of this design here, makes it very easy for the medical team. Some words on the 145. So we see here the larger cabin. We see we have 1, 2, 3, 4 medical seats. The capability here is more. The whole space, of course, is more. Is a platform that is, we can say, the most popular in the last years. Despite the 135 is still the highest number of HEMS helicopters in the world in terms of type. But this machine, of course, here provides more capability, as you can see, because the payload and the space is larger. So one simple example here, we will find the same elements. We will find medical seats. So it's different to a passenger seat. This medical seat can slide and you can turn them towards your patient. If you use a standard passenger seat, it's usually fixed and you have no possibility to slide or to turn. So here you can adjust the medical team position according to the situation. We see the medical wall is attached here to the side of the cabin and the typical device that you install, like a ventilator, defibrillator, monitor, suction unit, infusion pump. This is typical available on any HEMS helicopter if you talk about the full configuration. Here also we have the benefits. Again, the same on the 145, you can install all this in 15 to 20 minutes. We don't need a special floor here, so we can just add it to the Airbus standard floor, makes it even easier. And all the elements you see, you install without any tooling. You don't need a screwdriver. We have always this easy click and release system where you put the seat in the rails and you tighten it with some quick pin. And it's the same on the wall, for example. The whole wall you install in 1-2 minutes. We can offer the same capability here. So a light EMS configuration, maybe only a stretcher for the offshore configuration, up to intensive care system with a roll-in system. This is nearly standard on the 145. We have more space, we have more height. So all the operators use such kind of roll-in stretcher system that you see here on the picture. Patient up to 250 kilos. So more capabilities than on the 135 if he has here more height for the cabin. Of course, incubator transport is possible, which could be often an issue to solve the life of the young babies. This is also possible on the 135 with the incubator transport, but we see here again more space, more comfort. Also different seat possibilities on the 145. The ADAC typically have the seat on the left-hand side. We have now, or we wait soon for certification, the foldable seat in the center, and even some customer use the seat bench, foldable seat bench with 3 up to 6 seats possible if you need more people on board. Different storage, so you have a choice also. We have meanwhile developed different solutions for this one. I mentioned the medical wall. So you see again the red pins here. We attach it to the airframe. And again, this whole wall is connected to the airframe of the helicopter in 1 or 2 minutes. One person can do, and then you attach the medical device, a little power connection, and you have power, electricity, and oxygen connection here through the wall. Beside all this medical equipment, and we can talk for hours on this, I'm happy to do another session if you have an interest in the future. We can do also medical training. So we have, of course, experts also. Many customers in Europe fly our helicopters. But of course, the big experts are the other KEMS Academy. I used to work a lot with them in the past, so I'm happy that they are here in Nigeria and support you. And congratulations to Kazi organization also for the certification. So we would do this as well if there's a need. But as I said, the big experts, of course, is other KEMS Academy. So our products have a lot of advantages, and these flex solutions, for sure, as I said, can be installed in any helicopter that is already in your country, that will come to your country. Is it a new one? Is it a used one? It doesn't matter. We do a little modification and you can use and you can convert. So this flex solution, we think, provide good capability for Nigeria. And we hope to see, of course, your HEMS system taking off. I hope it was running smoothly. So thank you very much for having this opportunity here. Again, wish you a successful conference. Dr. Dayo, keep going, and good success for the HEMS development in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Dr. Aderonke Adesina, the president of the Society for Specialists in Airway Management in Nigeria. She's going to be giving a presentation on airway management in trauma. She's also presenting virtually.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dayo, for this opportunity to present this topic. And I also want to congratulate you on all the achievements through this association. So I'll just be giving a short presentation, and I'd like to say definitely we will not be able to go into the in-depth discussions on this topic. However, it will just be to stimulate our interest and garner support for improving airway management, whether on-site or during transit. So airway management practice is definitely similar to flying an aeroplane. So this is why this is very important, because we're talking about the transport of patients by air, and would also be touching on transports even on the road, because you definitely transport the critically ill or injured patient on land before you get to air travel. So we liken our checklist to the cockpit drill. So it's important also to draw an analogy with in the aviation industry, because they too do a lot of training, retraining, assessment of the situation, preparation and planning, and team coordination with specifically important aspects of communication using the SBAR mnemonic, and then simulation of different scenarios, and then debriefing. All these are aspects that are taken in aviation and also that are very important in airway management. So for airway management, particularly for patients that trauma patients, and during the transport of these critically ill patients, they have their peculiar challenges. But proper patient assessment with emphasis on the airway and some planning and great team coordination will reduce morbidity and mortality. So I'd like to stress here that airway management is not the sole responsibility of anesthetists. As we previously used to think, especially in Nigeria, every healthcare professional should know basic things about airway management, because we are all involved in it. And we need to also know and be very adept at various aspects, especially when you are involved in the transport of critically ill patients. So by way of reminding ourselves, the anatomy of the airway is basically the upper and the lower airway, and they are interdependent, and anything affecting one aspect can dovetail into the other aspects. So it's important to know that intervention is required most times to maintain patency, and that the upper airway is vulnerable to blockade as a result of trauma. So what are the many mechanisms of that can cause trauma to the airway? We know all this can, motor vehicle, traffic-related injury, in Nigeria, of course, motorcycle collisions that I'm not sure if it's less at the time. It used to really be very bad. And then pedestrian vehicular collision. Patients can also fall from heights. There could be fire and burns. And then, of course, assaults can lead to penetrating trauma. And this penetrating trauma can also result from a motor vehicle accidents as well. So why do we need to maintain the airway? There are specific things that can lead to increased morbidity and mortality. And patients that have been victims of trauma can be more predisposed to oxygen deprivation. So an unmanaged airway can lead to hypoxia and brain damage within minutes that can be irreversible. And then rapid deterioration can occur in trauma patients, and this can rapidly result in obstruction due to swelling, blood, or foreign objects. And this can eventually lead to increased mortality due to failure to secure the airway. This is a leading cause of preventable death in trauma patients. So the first thing, we have our, so to speak, main things that we do in airway management, the pillars of airway management. And the first thing is airway assessment. You cannot know how to manage the airway of the patient if you've not properly assessed the airway of the patient, particularly in trauma patients that have increased challenges. So the selection of your devices, the techniques you will use in managing, and the procedures all pivot on the evaluation you do. And this, as well as in other aspects of healthcare or medicine, starts with the history, followed by physical exam, and then this will now dovetail into choosing the types of further assessment that you do either by imaging or by doing some investigations. So you need to take a detailed history, particularly when you're thinking of the airway of previous intubation successes or failures. This might be quite difficult if this patient is unconscious and they don't have any relatives around. But if the patient is being transported from one airway facility to another, then this might be easy to do. Some patients carry, in advanced countries, they have medical records. This might also be accessible depending on the institution that the patient is being taken from. And then, of course, some patients wear medical alert bracelets. These are indispensable things to history, parts of the history to help. Then how do you know if a patient's airway is adequate? There are some things that might be pointers, quick pointers for you when you encounter these patients. If the patient is alert and oriented and talking, is probably not having any issues with the airway. If there is no evidence of injury to the head or neck, and then you have to remember that this is not a one-time assessment. You need to assess and reassess because there could be deterioration in the condition of the patient. So we can see here that visually examining, a physical examination for signs of obstruction and trauma is very, very important. And this could help you detect swelling, deformities, and crepitus. Also, eventually also listening, using your stethoscope, the ordinary stethoscope could help you indicating any form of compromise. And like I said, X-rays, if you are in a situation where you can still do X-rays for the patient before the instituting transport, this would be very important. And of course, we have the portable point of care ultrasound that is very, very important now in airway management. It can be carried around and is particularly important in accessing the cricothyroid membrane to help you know in case you have a difficult airway situation. and you need to do a front of neck access, you can easily then determine where the cricothyroid membrane is, particularly in patients that have swelling around the neck, in which palpation could be difficult. So what are the specific challenges in patients with trauma? We know that some might have pre-existing difficult airway, and then disrupted anatomy from trauma to the airway could further compromise and provide more difficulty. And then there's need for rapid action because most of them might be unconscious or might be in situations where they need to be quickly evacuated, or their situations or conditions might be deteriorating. So failure or delay may result in increased morbidity and mortality, and decisions need to be taken quickly. So for trauma patients, the cervical spine injury requires careful, the first thing that comes to mind in patients that have had trauma. And the indicators include when they've had head or neck injury, you want to been thrown out of the vehicle. In these patients, you need to make an assessment of cervical spine injury until otherwise proven. So it requires careful positioning to avoid further damage. And this is important because in these patients, you would need to position, do a midline, inline stabilization before you can intubate them or do further airway management. Also, facial trauma, distorted anatomy can impede visualization and intubation, and this can hamper your techniques and manipulations and maneuvers. So the other things, apart from difficult airway and distorted anatomy, is, of course, the things that are brought on, the challenges that are brought on some of these patients that can cause hemodynamic instability. There could be chest injury that would make positive pressure ventilation more challenging and even cause further harm to the patient. And there's risk of aspiration. Most of these patients are considered full stomach, and in manipulating their airway, there could be other injuries which could be life-threatening, and this needs to be taken into consideration. Then the situation, usually the settings are unfamiliar. You're not in an environment where you can easily find your equipment or get adequate support. Then inadequate resources and support personnel might not be available, like I said, and the fact that there's rapid response required puts extra pressure on all those involved. Then, of course, there are challenges specifically during the transportation process. So what are the things we can do during this that are specific for managing the airway of these patients? So we can start, like I said, from basic airway maneuvers and then dovetail depending on the situation of the patient. We can then move on to advanced airway management. Every healthcare professional should at least know about these basic airway maneuvers because they do not require any special airway equipment that require advanced training. So we could start with the head tilt and chin lift, this simple technique to open the airway by positioning the head and neck in unconscious patients. Then the jaw thrust is particularly important for patients that have neck injury, suspected cervical spine injury, in which head tilt and chin lifts are contraindicated. Then, of course, suctioning is important, like we have said before. Bleeding and blood and some foreign body can be in the airway. So proper suctioning is important to remove fluids, material, blood, and even aspirated gastric contents. So also, after doing all these maneuvers, and the patient doesn't get better, it's very important to think about supplemental oxygen that can be given using different equipment, simple equipment like the face mask, the nasal prongs. All this could help in managing the patient during transport and even on sites of the trauma the situation where the accident happened during transport till we get to a more specialized center where advanced airway management can then be commenced. So what are the advanced airway interventions? Let us start after you think of the basic ones using the face bag mask ventilation in patients that are not breathing adequately. We can then move on to supraglottic airway devices. This is an alternative airway tool that can bypass the larynx, and the examples are the laryngeal mask airway. These have been passed and used by even emergency department technicians, and they can easily, using them are less difficult compared to intubating the patients. However, in some patients, and they can be used to maintain the airway even in transit, rather than trying to intubate the patient in a situation where it is very difficult. So, but if doesn't work, the gold standard really in unconscious patients is to intubate them. So the placement of a tube directly into the trachea to maintain airway patency and also support the ventilation of the patient to prevent hypoxia during the transport to wherever we are going is a technique that we should all learn, especially for those involved in the management of this patient. However, there are some patients, either due to the trauma they have suffered or due to some difficult airway parameters that they had ab initio, you might not be able to intubate them. And in these patients, they might require a surgical cricothyrotomy or what we call a front of neck access. And this is important. It's important that we all have this skill in order to be able to ensure that we don't increase the morbidity or mortality of this patient in the process of transporting them. So of course, for advanced suctioning, this is important as well, as these patients are prone to having all these things in their airway, even in the process. So all these things are advanced airway interventions that can be taught. So this is just a diagram to show the different things that you can do. You can see here, any patient that has a Glasgow Coma scale less than 8 usually requires a definitive airway. And this is the major indication that we should keep at the back of our minds. And also for patients that you might think that they will deteriorate in the process of transport, you may want to give them a definitive airway before you transport them, because it's easier then to maintain their airway and support them in that process. So you can see the suctioning there, the surgical, the blade to do a front of neck access. You can do a chin lift, jaw thrust, the oropharyngeal airway, the LMA, laryngeal mask airway, and we can also use the nasopharyngeal airway or the definitive airway. So this is a diagram to just help us to understand the process and the things that we can do in patients with trauma, or even patients that we want to manage in the during transport. So the first column is showing the indicators. The techniques can be divided into the basic, like I said, basic airway. So when you are thinking of basic airway, is if you want to know, am I going to have difficulty doing a bag mask ventilation? And these are the indicators when you assess them. Am I moving on to the next level is difficult supraglottic airway, or what I called the laryngeal mask airway. These are the indicators that you might have issues or difficulty with that. And then going on from there, is laryngoscopy or intubation going to be difficult? These are the indicators. And particularly for trauma patients, this column shows the specific difficulty that is posed by patients that have trauma in them. And then definitely here is the approach that we should have in those situations. Now, trauma airway management in transit can be intra-hospital, inter-hospital, and of course, during air transport or road transport. So in the pre-hospital situation, you want to initiate basic airway maneuvers and oxygen delivery. And then, of course, en route to which within the departments in the hospital or during inter-hospital travel. Then in the emergency department, if you meet this patient either in the emergency department or at the site of accident, you want to conduct for a full airway assessment and decide on the appropriate interventions, and of course, prepare adequately. Then in transit care, you want to maintain the airway and ventilation during the transport to the definitive care center. So what are the indications for transport? You can see in many critically ill patients or patients that require transport, air transport, they are fraught with so many things, gadgets and all of that that need to be accounted for and taken into consideration in their transport. So the indications can be for investigations. You might want to take a patient from one center to the other or from one department of the hospital to the other to conduct investigations that are required in their management. They might need to some treatments in one center from the other or within the department or from one country to the other. And then, of course, the major one is transfer to more specialized centers where their care would be better. The potential risks include deterioration in their underlying condition. Our previous presenters have talked about the physiological effects of the movement on the cardiovascular system, the pulmonary system, and then the changes in barometric pressure and temperature associated with air transport are things to be taken into consideration, as this can affect their cardiovascular and pulmonary systems and then risk to both the patient and, don't forget, even the staff that are involved in their management. So the basic principles just include getting experienced staff, the appropriate equipment and vehicle, the full assessments and investigations should be done before you move the patient. Extensive monitoring should be incorporated. So I'm very glad that this was discussed in the ambulances and then the air transports by our previous presenter. And then careful stabilization of this patient to the best. You want to try and optimize the patient to your best capability before you move the patient. There's no hurry in moving patients. And then reassessment of the patient during the transport should always be done. Continuous monitoring and continuous care for their drugs and other things during the transfer, and a detailed handover to the receiving team. And documentation and audit should always be done by the team that is involved in the care of this patient. So planning and logistics should be done. You think of the personnel, you think of the patient and the equipment that are required during this transport time. So remember always, like I said at the beginning, we have checklists, and this diagram or this form here would help. And I know different institutions and groups and teams have theirs, but you could also adopt this that gives you a summary of everything and reminds you of the things you need to do in the process of preparation, planning, and even moving the patient and getting every equipment that is required available. To fail to plan is to plan to fail. And it's very important that this planning is done because it borders on the success of all your interventions. So the critical events can occur. It's important to think of the worst case scenario that can happen during the transport of these patients. And so when you think of it, don't just think of it, then you prepare for it, you plan for it. Preparation is getting everything ready. Planning is the detailed one step to the other, plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. What are we going to do if this happens? These discussions should be done before the transport of the patient. Technical difficulties occur during the transport of patients, and all this should be simulations should be done during training and retraining. Drills should be done. We should not think anything that can happen will happen, and it will be catastrophic if we have not prepared. So morbidity increases and mortality increases because adequate preparation was not done prior to the transport of patients. So we cannot overemphasize this. And if there's need to do CPR, then this should be done en route, and it should be continued to reach your destination. So what are the takeaways? You need to secure the airway as top priority in trauma care and during the transport of critically ill patients to prevent hypoxia and death. A comprehensive approach should be adopted. So trauma airway management requires a systematic assessment. It's not a flash in the plan thing. You need to assess your patient because this helps you to plan appropriately and to know what to do. The appropriate interventions should always be taken, and we should know that it starts from basic to advanced airway management, which includes the supraglottic airway management, the intubation, and the front of neck access. And we can use various techniques that we can't go into details on this lecture. And then, of course, this is a good opportunity, as I know that there are different stakeholders here, to know that we should continue training, we should retrain, and there should always be drills and simulations. And then continuous monitoring should be done throughout the entire care process. Thank you for listening, and I bring you greetings from the Society of Specialists in Airway Management. Thank you.
We have shell companies in the region, primarily Gulf of Guinea, then it became West Africa, then Sub-Saharan Africa. Right now, I don't even know what it is, but largely Nigeria. So that's basically what I do, just a bit to correct that a bit. I'm going to speak very briefly, and I'm not going to use any slides because I'm just going to have a conversation from the virtual audience and the guys in person here. And it's centering around improved airlift and HEMS capacity in the Gulf of Guinea. I look after 22 fixed assets production platforms where oil is drilled or gas is mined and all of that for shell companies. And I look after something like another rapport these days. So we've closed down many project sites. It's about 14 major project sites. Talking about project sites that have up to about $100 million share. So it's a reasonably large camp. They have a camp kind of facilities. This is ignoring all the pipeline repairs and all of that goes on almost all the time in Delta. I'm talking about proper project sites, building CPFs, building new sites and all of that. It's a bit of a lull in the industry. So that's come down to something like 14. This time was about 40 something to 50. I also look after 5 rigs. And so that's basically anyway. If you speak specifically to the offshore locations, then that brings the number down very significantly. Offshore, as we define it, which is you're out there in the middle of nowhere, then it would be something in the region of say 2 in Nigeria, 1, 2, 3, about 7 facilities. But for the purpose of this conversation, I'd like to class our swamp assets also in some context of offshore because of the same challenges. It was even more difficult. And what we're talking about is what we consider, what we refer to as extremely remote locations. And our definition of extreme is that it is not unlikely that we may be unable to reach you in 4 hours. What that means is that the circumstances, our typical response time, something like 20 minutes for tier 3. So how it works for us is you have any situation, medical incident here, the person next to you screams, a designated first aid that gets to you in 4 minutes maximum. And therefore, the medical person on campus within 11 to 20 minutes should reach you and start something that a health professional is offering you. And then you should get to definitive care, so where they're going to fix your real problem in 4 hours. So where it is not unlikely, we can conceive circumstances that we may not be able to reach or get you to tier 3 in 4 hours. We designate you as extremely remote locations. So all our offshore locations fit in that bucket, and a good number of our swamp locations fit into that bucket. And when we think about, once we designate you that, we begin to ask ourselves, how do we prepare for this situation where we may not reach you in 4 hours? It starts by saying, first and foremost, we look at the equipment. We high grade your medical facility inside to something that can begin to give you definitive care to a certain level beyond what we would do if you were on land next to us or on some reasonably accessible facility. So you get what we call an extended site clinic. It begins to have all the works, well, bells and whistles and good things around you. Many times we double up nurse and doctor, on site, looking care of the people. On the equipment side of things, from the health side of things. You must, of course, have a certified helipad, certified all of that, so we can then go on and do transport. Then we send only the fittest, or we hope we send only the fittest people out there. So you have to pass our most rigorous fitness work assessment to be able to work in what we think is an extremely remote location. So if you've got any significant cardiac illness, history of some cardiac incident and all that, you're not going to go there. I'm not going to let you go. Sorry. We find you somewhere safer to work with. Nobody lets you leave off work, but you have to find somewhere safer that we can reach you. Rule of thumb is that we've medevaced you before you don't go back. Generally speaking, it was for malaria. So it's just, no use things that in any book, but that's our rule of thumb. If we've had to medevac you before, typically we'd say, why don't you hang out with us nearer the office? Work from the office. It guides us. But still, it does happen. And when we come to providing, Dr. Algobani says that the best place to have an emergency is offshore. I disagree completely. No matter how much we put in there, it's a bad place to have a medical emergency. It just is. It's just too much that can go wrong. Too much can go wrong. What we then also put is that indeed there are most resourced facilities for medical response. And then it took me to become manager to realize that the medical emergency or an offshore location is not a medical problem. It's a logistics problem. The fundamental problem is a logistics problem. Fundamentally. And that's where I like to start the conversation. If a guy collapses in my office in Port Harcourt, we don't bat an eyelid. Oh, what block? All right, go get him up. A&E is in the A&E in 5 minutes. The campus is a large campus, but we have ambulances all waiting to go, drivers on standby, everything is in place. If it collapses in the residential area just across the fence, a few minutes, 2 kilometers down the express, he would be in the A&E in 10, 15 minutes. But even there, we've got doctors on the other campus who just start to do what they need to do. And also, we don't really worry. If you collapse in a land location, we're getting near to a better tier 3 clinic. I'm not even sure I look at the clock. It will get there. So if it's not sudden, it doesn't die immediately. We generally have a chance to do something. Offshore, it's always different. It's always different. And so we begin to think about the entire chain of survival and the chain of care, as it were. And I always say that the challenge is always, how do you move? Train the guys that are there. The general, everybody has an auxiliary role offshore. So if I am an engineer, I have an auxiliary role, either to respond to fire, to respond to health, to respond to that. Everybody has an auxiliary role. So we have test leaders who are trained to support and do things. And I like to take Philip and Robin there, because all of them are supposed to know how to do CPR and all of that kind of thing. Great guys to help support the medical person. We're not rich enough to have more than 2 medical persons on board per time. It's just going to be, that's the max because there's of redundancy. Sometimes a whole week they don't see anybody, and sometimes there's an avalanche of cases. When we get to them, we give them the best we can give them. We give them the best, really nice setup, sick bays and all of that. They can do things there while there, and give them some remote support, telemetry and all of that, try to support them in all the way. It's a decision to then move. That's where the problem starts. Essentially, we have about, I'd say 1 person per 20 is medevaced every year. So our typical small locations, a small rig, the rigs are usually more than that, a small platform. So offshore, typically you have platforms, production platforms. They're all over the place. You see them with a bit of fire and all of that. That's a platform, simple. And they will have about 20 people. Most of them are caterers. Or they take food to them, so they are fewer. It depends on how close they are to the main base. So that's a small location. Then you move to the medium-sized one, a small rig doing some work there may have 50 to 100 people on it. The big ones have upwards of 180, 250 people on the same rig or semi-submersible or FPSO. So you have most of them are ships that are retrofitted, or they are ships that are actual steel ships. You have FPSOs, so floating production storage offshore facilities. They can mine crude, receive crude, store crude and gas, do the initial sedimenting and then export from there. Rigs, semi-subs, the biggest rigs these days are semi-submersible. They're huge, massive structures. They carry about 200 plus people per time in that very confined space. One of the worst locations ever to have a problem offshore is what we refer to as the crude loading platform. The crude lines are further afield from the main location. So they are something like maybe about 40 nautical miles away, because they should be free of any encumbrance, and the super tankers go there to take the crude from. So they just latch on and all that. So there's a need to be away from the main facility, but people must man it. And when there's activity going on there, it's a small number of people. So you don't have the complement of even first aiders or a medical person at times. And they say, but they cannot be less than about 5-6 people there. The one day we had to medevac from a crude loading platform was one of the worst days in my job. It's just too complicated because it's not big enough to even have a helipad. So you go by boat. A medical incident, take a boat, surfer to move the person from crude platform, then to FPSO, transfer, load up, take to helipad about 7-8 stories up to a very narrow gangway. So the scenario of yesterday, in fact, I was telling my guys, that's what you get offshore. It's very narrow, because space is limited. You don't have luxury of space. How do you move a 250-pound guy about 8-10 floors? First of all, he's below deck, then or in the engine room. You're not going to find space. So it presents itself with very different possible scenarios. So that's our life, and that's the reality of it. And that's why I say it's always more than medical. Barges, where we keep accommodation people who are doing projects offshore, they stay in barges and all of that. And these are just, boxes that float, and then they have like maybe 200 people living on it and all of that, and coming to work on the main facility. Tugboats, surfers, smaller boats who support us, and security vessels. There's been some challenges with the aviation sports in Nigeria, in the oil industry, in the energy industry. Over time, there was a time when we're rich in quotes, that we literally at every point in time had 2 or 3 redundant choppers available to do anything else. If I got very upset, I needed to go to a location, I could ring up the aviation manager and say, I need to go to the location. He says, I think there's a chopper sitting somewhere. Hold on a second, let me ring the chopper. It was like a taxi service. Today, if it wasn't a top-level emergency, I probably have to give them 5 days notice to scramble a chopper from the crew, because there's just fewer and fewer serviceable choppers for some reason or the other. And I can't explain exactly why, because it doesn't make sense to me. It's not just commercial. I don't understand what's going on, but for crew, we're struggling with choppers, and it's across board. So the entire industry is trying to find a fix for it. What that has brought to the fore is that we cannot any longer rely on the crew chain choppers for medical evacuations. It's failed us before. It failed us sometime 2022. We couldn't get to someone who was severely ill offshore we couldn't get him out for about 6 hours, and it was a wake-up call. Now many ad hoc arrangements are in place to give us some kind of support, but I'm wondering if that situation arose again, if we would still be in that situation, and that's what we're trying to fix now. And it brings us to a world where no operator can provide enough cases to maximize the redundancy of, say, 1 or 2 dedicated choppers to 1 operator. It won't work. You might have the money, but it's not a good way to work or use the money. And that's why, to my colleagues, we continue speaking about, so can we buy into a service that provides dedicated aeromedical rescue from cradle to grave? You can go to any CLP, you can reach a patient if you have to, get him on the chopper, bring him to land, or take an ambulance, land ambulance to a facility of choice, maybe here in Lagos, for example, and if he needs to fly anywhere, put him on an air ambulance and take him to destination in optimum time. Money, I don't think is exactly the problem. The problem is to have a system that's effective and efficient. If I was the king of some good community, I wish I was, and I had all the money in the world, and I say I buy a chopper today and put it here, I pay this pilot, I pay that pilot, I pay that pilot. It doesn't work. If they don't fly, the license can't be renewed. If they don't have activity, you actually don't have an efficient system or an effective system. But I know now, having tried to do this for about a year and a half and having conversations going around all of the players, that the biggest problem is always getting everybody to cooperate. That's the problem. Everybody's noticing, everybody knows the problem exists. We all share the same headache. But we have to get beyond our legal teams, get beyond our commercial boundaries, get beyond everything. Say, let's have a conversation with the right heads in the room. If I have 1 in 20, so 1 in 20 people have Medivacs a year, I've got something like, specifically, something like nearly 1,000 people offshore. So that's definite that I'm going to have maybe about 45, 50 Medivacs in a year. Not enough to keep one pilot happy, but if Total came in the game, that takes it to about something like nearly 100. If Exxon came in the game, 140, maybe. Now, ENI, the marginal players, we're now in 200. When it begins to look exciting, when it becomes a bit more possible, that is an effective system, an efficient system that works. If we all feed off 1 or 2 aeromedical providers for international transfer, then you know that I can call on that service and it's a bit more reliable. Any service out of Europe can be here in 6 hours, turn around, and from here they can go anywhere. Those kind of, but the synergies must work. Synergies must work. And I'm not sure who's in the audience, but I think that the partnerships between the different groups, and not just energy, the guys in construction, the Dangote refiners of this world have to get in the game as well. The guys, everywhere you have any high risk kind of work, and every construction site, every construction industry related activity, energy related activity as well, that are all high risk sites. So you're going to have this problem. If it's not from trauma, then it's from the inherent medical conditions that people carry and go on to work. There is, for me, it's an emergency, because the problem with these things is that they may not happen for 2 years. And then the one case means you're in court, because you're signed up to provide this service to the people who work for you. And to fail to have the system to provide it exposes you. So whatever redundancies that are reasonable are probably things that we can act, but we must do it together. And that's the basis of the conversation. So CACI presents a sort of ray of light of some sort, because it's trying to gather people together to have the conversation in the context of airlifting and airlifting across a wide guarantee. And one of the jokes I have with Bayo at times is, you know, we could pay for it, but you also respond to people in the normal society. So we pay, but you have some part of the service available, so you can have enough activity to keep doctors, pilots, everybody sort of keep their skills handy and everything and all of that. Still have enough redundancy to make sure that whenever anybody needs, it's available. So maybe an N+1 philosophy or something like that. Something has to give, because I know we can't go on like this. We can't. None of the chopper services that I'm aware of has excess capacity today in country, and we are all managing to get along. Transport people is fine. If you're late for a crew change, we can find another means to get you there. It's not a life and death situation. So we can find a good surfer to take you. These things like that. You can't say the same for someone who's sick. Can't say for someone who's sick, and we can no longer. We used to park a chopper purely for medical reasons back in the day when I first joined. It's not just feasible today, not because we can't even afford it, but because the operators just keep saying we had nine choppers, 7, 6, 3, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. Today is going for 8. I'm sorry, I can't. You know, we got spoiled. I got spoiled. I used to call out choppers at will. You know, that guy, you're not looking too good. Well, you want to manage him? Why don't you bring him out? I'm sending you a chopper. He's gone. And today, I need to plead. You have a chopper. Tell me you have a chopper, please, please. That's the world I live in today, and that is not good enough. And when you do that, what happens is that you take out the seats and then put a glass pressure in, try and hold and bolt it down, get someone from the clinic to go. They're not even trained actually in aeromedical rescue. So we're ad hocing. At best, you get somebody who's got ACLS capacity, thankfully. But they're not really trained for this. And like I said, it's not like frequent events. but it's a high risk, high exposure event, and we must mitigate for it. So wherever you sit on the chain, let's have the conversation. Let's see what's possible. And hopefully we fix this, not just for the energy industry, but for everyone, because the risk is everyone's. And I like to think that we can make a difference in somebody's survival because we could provide airlift even in our sites, in our regular cities, for cases that are critical or multiple crash situations and all of that. We can handle the most critical in that way, shorten the transport time, get them to good care, hopefully change the outcomes medically. Pray with me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nze. So now we're going to take a presentation from Mr. Morris from Eonomed Air. They are our partner for transport ventilators. Welcome, Mr. Morris.
I am Morris from Eomed Beijing, China. We are actually manufacturer of medical devices equipment. So we do a lot of ventilators, anesthesia machines, many other ORO products. So we discovered that CASI has a lot to do with us. So we partner with them. So you will see a short video of who we are and our product like.
Enthusiasm is the foundation of continued progress and innovation. Sincerity is the root of trust. Meeting the needs of the globe is our mission. And our mission is accomplished through partnership and sincerity. Founded in 2001, Eomed is a leading medical equipment manufacturer specializing in production of ventilators and anesthesia machines. Emergency medical assistance was imperative in handling disasters such as the Wenchuan, Yushu, and Nepal earthquakes. Eomed medical equipment was observed in these devastating disasters, providing life support, treating the wounded, and keeping patients breathing during transportation and within hospitals. Based in Beijing and focused on research and development, branding, as well as seeking sustainable development. Eomed maintains a global insight. Eomed integrates quality resources from both China and beyond to build world-renowned products. Eomed products have been exported to more than 130 countries and numerous regions, covering all countries included in the One Belt and One Road initiative. Years of dedication to quality and service have led Eomed to now host a complete line of peri-operative products and medical solutions. Eomed's emergency transport ventilators, found all around the world, were the official emergency transport ventilator of the Olympic Games, as well as have assisted humanitarian work in the military services. The solid base provides safe, reliable, and comfortable surgical positions for patients. Our surgical light series is outfitted with an innovative refraction design. It maintains optimal lighting effects and excellent operation function. The ceiling supply system of Eomed is hailed as a flexible gas lifeline, as it provides safe and versatile surgical supports while creating a clean and efficient working environment for modern medical rooms. Our medical heating blanket, Sun 5, effectively prevents hypothermia in surgery and ensures the patient's safety. Eomed's carefully designed anesthesia workstations accurately and safely provide anesthetic agent to patients and support quality respiration. The patient can be safely anesthetized with surgical data entirely accessible to medical staff. Eomed's integrated video system for the OR has state-of-the-art recording and display technologies, all of which are intended to optimize digital interactive operation platforms. Our real-time audio and video capture during the operation can be transferred, live-streamed, and shared at any point during the procedure. With this quality integration, surgeons and clinicians are able to enjoy remote communication from anywhere in the world. As the pioneer of ventilator production in China, EMS ventilator series have the biggest market share within the country, as well as has maintained its position as the leader among domestically produced ventilators, whether for inpatient or home care. We provide tested and considerate protection and accurate controls to make sure our patient can breathe smoothly with every respiration. As a key innovator in the industry, YIMAT has more than 30 patents for each product, with a total of 1,185 patents and 772 utility patents achieved by our leadership. YIMAT maintains quality as our central focal point and has participated in drafting national quality standards for ventilators and anesthesia workstations. YIMAT products have maintained the ISO 13485 quality certificate, and many of its products maintain CE and FDA certificates. YIMAT's evaluation laboratory has been honored with a CNAS certificate and become a cooperative laboratory of the SGS. YIMAT has a well-established after-sales service system around the world. Concentration, innovation, honesty, and dedication have helped YIMAT achieve global prominence. Through maintaining a long-term end-user and client focus, YIMAT has cooperated with thousands of experts here and abroad to build an efficient platform for the purpose of quality production system, research, and medical care during peri-operative period. YIMAT constantly evaluates changes in clinical demands, focuses on the development of reliable products, as well as industry innovation. Facing the future, YIMAT continues to set the standard for cutting-edge product development, sustainable service, and ensure safety and quality.
So if you need any of all these, our products like anesthesia machine, ventilators, operating table, operating light, we also have BiPAP and CPAP. So our transport ventilator is right over there. So, and it was displayed in the video. So if you need any of them, we are fully on ground in Nigeria. We have our technical team. The good thing is that we are manufacturer. So as a result, support is very much available. So training and workshop is also being done by us. So I will appreciate if you can make do of our ventilators, especially transport ventilators for your airway management. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morris. We have one more presentation from Ionad.
My name is Dr. Kingsley Obule. As rightfully Dayo has introduced me, I'm the president of Hyperbaric Physicians of Nigeria. I'm also the occupational health manager for Marine Platforms. My experience in the industry has spanned 15 years going, offshore and remote medicine. I'm an occupational health physician as well. So to give a brief of what my experience and my insight has been in the past, over the past decade in the offshore medieval rescue emergency response system. Just want to share some light about it. So I'll be sharing my valuable insights on the onshore emergency response and rescue operation. I'd like to highlight some critical and important issues here. So such as preparedness, of our activities and in terms of emergency response offshore and remote location. And in terms of preparedness, it has to entail the team on the ground and as well as the team offshore itself. So regularly what we do is that we have for the emergency response, you have a medical team, basically led by the doctor on site. You have your medical team, your first aiders to respond to medical emergency. And medical emergencies could be result as a fire, could result to work-related issues or to non-medical accidental issues that have occurred over the time. So depending on the situation, of what has happened in terms of the cause of the medical emergency, we respond to the site. So the system in offshore and remote area is that there's what they call an emergency response system. If there's an emergency, it's activated. The personnel involved are communicated that we have an emergency. So everybody is actually either being pinged, called on the radio, over the phone. Then the support based on shore too is also made aware. So based on the assessment of the medical team, if the person requires a medical evacuation, that decision will be made and now communicated to all the other team, both onshore. And when this is done already, then we need to airlift this person. How do we do that? Then there's a chopper, but that will be made available. But it's a regular chopper that is converted into a makeshift air ambulance. So basically, being converted into a makeshift medical ambulance, that's what will now be promulgated to come offshore. So some of the challenges we face is that Nigeria being one of the oil and gas industry, we've been there offshore over the last 20 years. We don't have a dedicated air ambulance that's for medical rescue in case there is an emergency. Emergency doesn't tell us the time, doesn't give us prior notice before it occurs. So when we have such instances and we activate the emergency response system and we need to do a medevac, so what they start to do is to get, there's no standby helicopter, there's no standby chopper for that purpose. They go to meet the chopper provider, if it's Carverton, if it's Bristol, either one of them. They go to meet them. They say, oh, okay, we have an emergency. Okay, what's the closest place to respond? Port Harcourt, Warri, Lagos. They take off the seat, they put in a stretcher, either a nurse or a doctor comes along with it. But we know that in terms of critically ill or accidental patients, you will need more sophisticated things on the air ambulance, and we don't have that. Even in case of we have an emergency, a disaster, we don't have that. So based on that, that comes out. The time to take to make all the preparation, and you have someone that is critically injured, let's say we have a stroke case, a vessel-occlusive one, that we have 60 to 90 minutes for the person to get to a center whereby they can use the burst drug to actually dissolve the cloth, and it's a matter of time. So before the chopper comes in from the closest place, which might be Warri, 30 minutes, 25 minutes. But preparation will take another 1 hour, 30 to 1 hour, to get all these things sorted out. Time is running against us. It's a time game. So if we had a dedicated medical air ambulance that, they are always on they just require to say, go, they are on the move. That alone will save a lot of time. With the medical equipment that are attached to the helicopter for that purpose, will actually make us save more lives. Because our responsibility primarily as medical personnel, our physicians, is to save lives. And statistics is what matters. So in this industry, we realize that we don't have that backbone. We don't have that facility. These are some of the challenges that we face. And we have a lot of the multinationals that can come together, bring resources together, have one or two initially of these ambulances, based on that can service the Gulf of Guinea or remote areas when you have emergencies. So if that is done, that saves time, the response time is there, the personnel are well trained to handle such situation. So from the time of the incident, time of the assessment, you made your call, you've activated the emergency response system, you've activated the land and response support team for a medical ambulance, dedicated one to come out and relocate the injured person to the proper facility on shore. So I think we've had some incidents in the past whereby we had different cases from trauma related to work, non-accidental deaths, such as stroke, emergencies that required emergency intervention, based surgical procedures. So, and in terms of that, it's a time factor. Complications can set in, and we need this facility, especially in remote areas. Not talking about, being where we are, maybe you're within the city, you have an accident, and a road traffic accident, you need to lift the person to the nearest center. Maybe there's traffic on the road, and but remote area, you don't have, what you have is just the doctor, the support on land, and it's a matter of time. The closest shop site is like 30 minutes away from you, and that plays a whole lot of impact on what you're trying to do to save the patient's life. So what's the way forward? The way forward is like what Dr. Dayo has been trying to push and trying to bring across, for people to actually key into this dedicated air ambulance support, for all the industries, all the major players. You have the major players, you have the Nigerian players as well, local companies that are now going to, they have license to operate and things like that. What is their response? What is their plan when they have medical emergency? Even in some places, you use a boat, you use a surfer. That takes a lot of time to transport someone from maybe not too shallow water to a hospital. To give you a reference, during the time of COVID, we had an outbreak on one of the vessels, the first of its kind, in when we had on a support vessel infield, and we needed to medevac and evacuate people. What did we do? We just went to where the company in which we partner, we're working for. We got the helicopter to actually evacuate almost close to 60 people in different batches at that point in time, So these are some of the necessary things that, we need a dedicated medical air ambulance. At that point in time, it would be very helpful if you had a dedicated medical air ambulance, because we had a positive case there. Initially, they had some other people that tested positive, and we needed to, evacuate them. We had someone that was actually respiratory distress. We just had to, use the normal. There we not fully understood what COVID was. Went with all our PPEs. We done the PPE on the exposed patient himself that tested positive. Took him on the chopper, brought him down. We had a dedicated ambulance waiting on ground, the 2-chamber ambulance, to transfer the person to the treatment center. But I cannot lay more emphasis than saying that everyone needs to come together, ensure that we have something, a dedicated medical air ambulance in case of a disaster, in case of an emergency, whether onshore or offshore. And I know that with what Dr. Dayo is doing, actually is giving exposure, is giving the cry out, the pressing to people, and those that want to listen to us, that said, this is the way forward. This is what we need to do. Thank you very much, everyone. And thanks for listening to my presentation, my experience so far in the industry. If anyone has any question, I'm willing and able to attend to them. Thank you very much.
Sabi girl no dey too like talk. Animals dey in human form. Body man nobody like walk, but you must hustle if you want job.